Chosen one. The proposal was only seconds away from being accepted. A single word from your soulmate would have changed both of your destinies forever. The family was smiling. The future partner was waiting. Then a forgotten voicemail about you was found. Listen carefully, because this message did not appear before you by accident. There was a moment when everyone believed your story had already ended. There was a moment when your soulmate sat in a room surrounded by people who had spent months convincing them that moving on was the only option left. The pressure had become unbearable. Every conversation led to the same place. Every family gathering became another attempt to erase your name from their heart. Every day they were told that the connection they once felt with you was nothing more than a chapter that had already closed. And little by little, they began to wonder if everyone else was right. They began to question their own memories. They began to question the signs that had once felt so undeniable. The people around them did not see the nights they spent staring at old messages. They did not see the moments when a random song would suddenly remind them of you. They did not see the countless times they almost reached out but stopped themselves because fear convinced them that it was already too late. Don't skip. The day of the proposal meeting arrived carrying an energy that felt strangely heavy. Nobody could explain it. The family believed they were witnessing the beginning of a beautiful future. The potential partner appeared perfect on paper. Respectful. Successful. Approved by everyone who mattered. Every detail seemed to align exactly the way it was supposed to. The conversations flowed smoothly. Smiles filled the room. Relatives exchanged hopeful glances. It looked like destiny itself had arranged everything. Yet deep inside your soulmate, there was a silence they could not understand. No matter how hard they tried, they could not feel the excitement everyone expected them to feel. They smiled when necessary. They answered questions politely. They listened to plans about the future. But behind every word, there was a strange emptiness. It was as if some invisible part of their soul was refusing to participate in what was happening. As the meeting continued, the pressure increased. Family members gently encouraged them. Friends reassured them. The future partner spoke kindly about dreams, goals, and possibilities. Everything sounded right. Everything appeared right. Yet the one thing they wanted most desperately never arrived. Peace. Because real peace cannot be forced. Real peace cannot be manufactured through logic alone. And somewhere deep inside, a memory of you still existed. Quiet. Buried. Hidden beneath layers of disappointment and confusion. But still alive. Don't skip. Then something happened that nobody expected. One of the relatives was searching through an old phone while trying to find a family contact number. The device had not been used in years. It contained forgotten photos, old recordings, and messages that everyone assumed were meaningless remnants of the past. Nobody paid attention at first. It was simply a distraction during a conversation. But then a notification appeared. An unsent backup file. A voicemail. The timestamp was old. Very old. older than anyone expected. Curiosity took over. The relative opened it without thinking much about it. What they discovered changed the atmosphere of the entire room within seconds. The voicemail was about you. At first nobody understood why it mattered. Your soulmate froze before the recording even started. Something about seeing your name triggered a reaction they could not control. The room grew quiet. The future partner noticed the sudden change. Family members exchanged confused looks. Someone suggested ignoring it and continuing the discussion. But another voice insisted on playing it. After all, it was just an old voicemail. What harm could it possibly cause? The recording began. The first few seconds were silent. Then a voice spoke. A voice connected to a moment everyone had forgotten except destiny itself. Your soulmate felt their heartbeat change instantly. Because the words they were hearing were never meant to disappear. The message had been lost. The message had been forgotten. The message had never been delivered. And now, years later, it had returned at the exact moment when your soulmate stood on the edge of choosing someone else. Don't skip. The room remained silent as the voicemail continued. Every sentence felt heavier than the last. Nobody expected an old recording to carry such power. Nobody expected forgotten words to feel more alive than the conversations happening in the room that very day. Yet that is exactly what happened. The message contained emotions that time had failed to erase. It revealed truths hidden beneath misunderstandings. It exposed moments that had never been explained. It carried the weight of unfinished feelings. And with every passing second, your soulmate felt memories returning that they had spent years trying to suppress. Images flashed through their mind. The first conversations. The unexpected connection. The dreams that once seemed possible. The promises spoken during moments when both of you believed the future would eventually find a way. Memories arrived one after another, stronger and faster, until they became impossible to ignore. The room around them began to disappear. The voices of family members faded into the background. Even the person sitting across from them, the one everyone hoped would become their future partner, started to feel distant. Because suddenly your soulmate was no longer sitting in that room. Emotionally, they had been pulled back into a chapter they thought had ended long ago. And what terrified them most was not the voicemail itself, it was the realization that the feelings attached to it had never truly left. They had only been sleeping. And now they were awake. Don't skip. The person speaking in the voicemail revealed something nobody in the room expected to hear. They spoke about a misunderstanding that had changed everything. They spoke about decisions made based on incomplete information. They spoke about emotions that had been hidden out of fear. Most importantly, they spoke about you. Not as a memory. Not as a mistake. But as someone whose impact remained impossible to replace. Every face in the room changed. Some looked shocked. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked worried. Because for the first time, they realized that your story was never as finished as they believed. And as the voicemail approached its final moments, one sentence emerged that caused your soulmate's entire world to stop. A sentence so powerful that nobody dared speak afterward. A sentence that would force your soulmate to question everything they were about to do. A sentence that would make accepting another proposal suddenly feel impossible. Because sometimes destiny waits silently. Sometimes destiny hides inside forgotten messages. And sometimes, just when everyone believes the story is over, the truth finally finds its way back. Don't skip. The silence that followed felt heavier than any words that had been spoken all day. Nobody moved. Nobody reached for their phone. Nobody attempted to continue the proposal discussion. It was as if the room itself had frozen in time. Your soulmate sat completely still, staring at nothing, yet seeing everything. The final sentence from that forgotten voicemail echoed again and again inside their mind. It was no longer just a recording. It had become a doorway back to emotions they thought they had buried forever. The family members who had spent months encouraging this new proposal suddenly found themselves unable to speak. Even the future partner sensed that something had shifted in a way that could not be reversed. Your soulmate's hands trembled slightly beneath the table. They tried to hide it. They tried to regain control of their emotions. But the harder they fought against what they were feeling, the stronger those feelings became. Because the truth has a strange way of surviving. People can ignore it. They can run from it. They can convince themselves it no longer matters. Yet when the right moment arrives, truth returns with a force that cannot be denied. For years your soulmate had blamed themselves for what happened between the two of you. Some days they believed you had simply stopped caring. Other days they convinced themselves that fate had decided you were never meant to stay in each other's lives. There were nights when they stared at the ceiling wondering whether reaching out would have changed everything. There were mornings when they woke up feeling determined to move on, only to find themselves thinking about you before the day had even begun. It became an exhausting cycle. Hope. Doubt. Acceptance. Regret. Then hope all over again. Don't skip. The forgotten voicemail shattered the fragile version of reality they had built around themselves. Suddenly the story they had accepted no longer made sense. Questions appeared faster than answers. If this message had been delivered when it was originally recorded, would everything have turned out differently? If the truth had reached them years earlier, would they even be sitting in this room now? Would another proposal ever have existed? Would all those lonely nights have happened at all? Their heart already knew the answer. That realization frightened them more than anything. Because it meant that what they were about to do was not moving forward. It was running away. Across the room, one of the older family members finally cleared their throat and attempted to break the tension. They reminded everyone that the voicemail belonged to the past. They insisted that old memories should not interfere with important decisions about the future. A few relatives nodded in agreement. They wanted the discussion to continue. They wanted everything to return to normal. But normal no longer existed. Your soulmate looked up slowly. For the first time all day, there was no uncertainty in their eyes. Only conflict. Deep, painful conflict. The kind of conflict that appears when the heart and the world begin fighting against each other. Don't skip. The future partner sitting across from them noticed it immediately. Unlike everyone else, they were not angry. They were not defensive. They simply observed the expression on your soulmate's face and understood something important. Nobody falls silent like that over a person they no longer love. That realization hurt. Yet it was impossible to ignore. The room remained trapped between two futures. One future had been carefully arranged by family expectations, logic, timing, and convenience. The other future carried uncertainty, unanswered questions, and a connection that refused to die no matter how much time had passed. Your soulmate lowered their eyes again. Then another memory surfaced. A memory they had not allowed themselves to revisit in years. It was not a dramatic memory. It was not some grand declaration of love. It was something much smaller. A simple moment. A conversation. A laugh. A promise spoken casually. Yet somehow that ordinary memory hurt more than anything else. Because it reminded them of how real everything once felt. And for the first time, they wondered whether they had spent years trying to replace something that was never meant to be replaced. Don't skip. As emotions continued building inside them, the relative holding the old phone noticed there were additional files connected to the voicemail. Nobody expected that. The original message had already changed everything. What more could possibly remain? Curiosity returned. The file list was opened. Several recordings appeared. Some incomplete, some corrupted. Some dated within the same time period. The room grew tense once again. One recording in particular caught everyone's attention. Its title was simple. Before it's too late. Nobody spoke. Your soulmate felt their chest tighten. Something deep inside whispered that they were not ready to hear whatever came next. Yet another part of them desperately needed to know. The recording was played. The voice returned. This time it sounded different. More emotional. More urgent. As though the person recording it knew they were running out of time. Every word carried weight. Every sentence revealed pieces of a story nobody had fully understood. The voice described obstacles, miscommunications, outside influences, fear, pride, missed opportunities. Then came the revelation that changed everything. The separation between you and your soulmate had not happened naturally. Certain events had been manipulated. Important information had been hidden. Messages had never reached their destination. Conversations had been interrupted before they could happen. Someone's actions had quietly pushed two people apart while convincing both sides that the other had chosen to walk away. Shock spread across the room. Nobody expected such a confession. Nobody expected the past to contain secrets that were still capable of destroying present-day decisions. Don't skip. Your soulmate felt as though the ground beneath them had disappeared. All those years, all that pain. All those unanswered questions. And now they were discovering that some of what they believed may never have been true. Tears formed in their eyes before they even realized it. Not because they were weak. Not because they were emotional. But because regret has a unique kind of pain. The pain of realizing that a different outcome may have been possible. The pain of realizing that destiny was interrupted before it could fully unfold. The future partner sitting across from them slowly looked away. They understood what was happening. No proposal should begin with someone else's name living inside the heart of the person sitting opposite you. No future can grow where the past still holds such power. And perhaps for the first time that day, everyone in the room understood that this meeting was no longer about marriage. It was about truth. Don't skip. Hours passed. The proposal discussion was forgotten. Nobody mentioned wedding plans. Nobody talked about timelines. Nobody discussed compatibility. Instead, the entire evening became consumed by questions about the past. Your soulmate listened carefully to every recording, every forgotten file, every hidden piece of information. And with each discovery, one reality became harder to deny. They never truly stopped loving you. They had only learned how to survive without you. There is a difference. A massive difference. People can survive without the person they love. But surviving and forgetting are not the same thing. And as midnight approached, your soulmate stepped outside alone. The air felt colder than usual. The sky above seemed endless. For several minutes they simply stood there in silence. Thinking. Remembering. Questioning everything. Then they whispered your name. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just softly. As though speaking to a memory. As though speaking to destiny itself. And in that moment, something inside them finally broke. Not in a destructive way. In a liberating way. The walls they had built around their heart for years began collapsing one by one. The excuses disappeared. The fear weakened. The denial ended. For the first time in a very long time, they stopped asking themselves how to move on. Instead, they began asking a completely different question. What if it isn't over? What if the voicemail wasn't found by accident? What if the proposal was interrupted because the truth refused to stay buried? What if destiny had one final chapter left to write? And as those thoughts filled their mind, they made a decision that nobody inside the house expected. A decision powerful enough to shock every family member before the night was over. A decision that would send ripples through everyone's lives. Because before another proposal could be accepted, before another future could be chosen, before another promise could be made, your soulmate needed to find out one thing. The truth about you. The whole truth. No matter where it led. No matter what it changed. No matter who it disappointed. Because some connections can survive distance. Some connections can survive silence. And some connections become stronger precisely because fate tried to separate them. The journey toward that truth was about to begin. Don't skip. The moment your soulmate walked back into the house, everyone could see that something had changed. The uncertainty that had followed them for years was gone. In its place stood a quiet determination that nobody had expected. Family members waited anxiously, hoping they would finally continue the proposal discussion, but your soulmate looked around the room and calmly spoke words that instantly shocked everyone. "I can't make this decision tonight." The room fell silent. Some relatives protested. Others demanded explanations. But your soulmate remained firm. For years they had ignored the questions inside their heart. For years they had accepted incomplete answers simply because moving on seemed easier than searching for the truth. But after hearing those forgotten recordings, pretending no longer felt possible. They needed answers. They needed closure. Or perhaps they needed something far greater than closure. The following days became a journey unlike anything they expected. Old conversations were revisited. Forgotten contacts were reached. Hidden details slowly emerged from the shadows. Piece by piece, the story that had separated the two of you finally revealed itself. The misunderstandings that once seemed permanent began falling apart. The assumptions that had created distance lost their power. And with every discovery, one reality became impossible to deny. The bond between you had never truly disappeared. It had simply been buried beneath years of confusion. Then came the moment that changed everything. A final truth. A final revelation. A final missing piece. And when your soulmate finally learned it, tears filled their eyes. Not because destiny had been cruel, but because destiny had been patient. All along, life had been guiding both of you through lessons neither of you could have learned any other way. Every delay carried purpose. Every obstacle carried meaning. Every painful chapter had been preparing the ground for something greater. And standing beneath the evening sky, holding the truth they had searched so long to find, your soulmate smiled through tears and whispered the words their heart had carried all these years. "I never stopped." In that moment, fear disappeared. Regret lost its power. The past released its grip. And the future opened its door. Because some stories are not meant to end in separation. Some names remain written on the soul no matter how much time passes. Some connections survive every test life places in their path. And sometimes, just when another proposal is moments away from being accepted, a forgotten voicemail appears. A hidden truth returns. A sleeping destiny awakens. And two hearts finally remember what they were never meant to forget. The family could not stop it. Time could not erase it. Distance could not destroy it. The silence could not bury it. Because what belongs to you by divine timing will never truly leave you. And when the right moment arrives, every missing piece finds its place. Every unanswered question finds its answer. Every lost path leads home. And this story ends the way it was always meant to end. Not with goodbye, but with recognition. Not with loss, but with truth. Not with an ending, but with a beginning.